Okay, so we are continuing our conversation about trade. In the previous video, we talked about why trade can be beneficial, looked at the oldest model, the absolute advantage, and where we look just on the productivity and determine who produces what simply based on who can produce more at the same time. And then we ran into a problem with this example where you can see that the one country has an advantage in both goods over the other country. So as we determined, based on the absolute advantage model, France should be producing both and Germany should be producing nothing. So basically there should be no trade. The good news is that this is not the only theory, and even its simplest spin-off, the comparative advantage theory, allows us to actually resolve this issue without resorting to saying there should be no trade. Think about it this way. If I'm more productive at everything, there's potentially a chance that I'll have to give up more of one good to produce another good than my counterpart. So is it possible that France, while being more productive at both beer and wine than Germany, may have a higher opportunity cost of one of them than Germany? Say, may need to give up more beer to produce wine or more wine to produce beer than Germany. So let's look at this particular example and let's determine which country in this particular situation actually does have the absolute advantage in the production of the good. Comparative advantage, I'm sorry, in the production of the good. So the idea of a comparative advantage theory is that first thing that we need to do is calculate the opportunity costs. So look at how much a producer needs to give up in order to produce one unit of this particular good. Once we figure that out, we compare the opportunity cost between the two countries, and we say, hey, the country that has a lower opportunity cost of this good has a comparative advantage in it, at which point the theory would tell us that this country should focus in this particular good. Okay, so if we figure out that Germany has a lower opportunity cost than France, in beer, for example, then Germany should be producing beer. And if France has a lower opportunity cost of wine than Germany, then France should be producing wine. So let's get back to our numbers. Okay, so this is the German numbers, and let's start with this. I'm just going to pull up actually, why don't we put all the numbers on the screen? And I'm going to go to my board. I don't know why, for some reason, it kind of closed the data. So, in any case, hopefully you guys have written down these numbers. Okay, so when it comes to writing down the opportunity costs for questions like this, I prefer arranging it in a table. So in this table, we're going to have beer and wine. And here we'll have two countries, Germany and France. Okay, so now let's calculate the opportunity costs. So Germany can produce either 20 barrels of beer or 10 gallons of wine in an hour. So if you imagine the situation where Germany right now is using an hour to produce wine, and now it takes that hour and shifts it to the production of beer, what is it going to lose? Well, it's going to lose 10 gallons of wine. What is it going to gain? Well, based on its productivity, it's going to gain 20 barrels of beer. So 10 gallons of wine over 20 barrels of beer tells us that the opportunity cost of beer in Germany is 1/2 gallon of wine. Okay? Now, think about the opposite situation. So if Germany takes an hour that they were using to produce beer and shifts it to the production of wine, well, they're going to lose 20 barrels of beer, but gain 10 gallons of wine. So the opportunity cost in this case is 2. Now, notice, you'll see this here, and you'll see that in our bananas and computers table, that between the same points, these opportunity costs are the reciprocals of each other. 1/2 and 2. 2 and 1/2. And this becomes a very important result in a few minutes. Now, let's do the opportunity cost of beer in France. So, if the French move 1 hour from the production of wine to the production of beer, they are going to lose 20 gallons of wine, gain 25 barrels of beer. So 20 over 25, that's 4/5, or 0.8. By the way, this is 0.5. And again, the opposite happens if France moves an hour from the production of beer to the production of wine. They're going to lose 25 barrels of beer, gain 20 gallons of wine. So our opportunity cost here is 1 1/4. 1/25. Okay? Okay. So now we have all the numbers to figure out the comparative advantages. Which country has the lowest opportunity cost of beer? So we're looking down this column. Definitely 0.5 is less than 0.8, which means Germany has the comparative advantage in beer. And here's a trick, guys. With the comparative advantage, since these opportunity costs within each country are the reciprocals of each other, because this is 4/5, this is actually 5/4, you know that there is no way you can have a comparative advantage in everything. Now, this is a common mistake, but again, there's no way you can have a comparative advantage in everything. Because if you have a lower opportunity cost of one good, the moment you flip these opportunity costs, you ended up having a higher opportunity cost of another good. So 0.5 is less than 0.8. So Germany has the comparative advantage in beer, but 2 is higher than 1 1/4, which means France has the comparative advantage in wine. Bam! We just solved that issue where we had a problem that one country had an absolute advantage in everything. Since you cannot have a comparative advantage in everything, this actually solves the situation. Our theory, comparative advantage theory here clearly states that Germany should produce beer. Unfortunately, it also says Germany should produce beer and only beer. So we still have this complete specialization, but at least we resolved one of the issues. So Germany should be producing beer, and France should be producing wine in this particular situation. It's that simple. Germany has the lower opportunity cost of beer. It has the comparative advantage in beer. It should produce beer. France has the lower opportunity cost of wine. It has the comparative advantage in wine. It should produce wine. Now, the next question that we usually ask is, okay, if that happens, then what should be the price of the good? At which price should our two parties be trading? And that becomes kind of an interesting question. So, since we're not really dealing with dollars, we usually don't call it price at this point. We call it the mutually beneficial terms of trade. That's basically an exchange rate at which the goods are traded between the two parties. And it has to be mutually beneficial, so that's why we need to work it out. And I often tell my students, think about this, guys. If we draw a simple number line by arranging a couple numbers on that line, we can actually get an answer to our question. So let's try and find the mutually beneficial terms of trade in terms of how much wine will be given per barrel of beer. So we're talking about gallons of wine per barrel of beer. Okay? And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to draw a number line, of course, from 0 to infinity. And I'm going to put Germany right here. And ask a question. What is the smallest number of gallons of wine that Germany will be willing to take for a barrel of beer? And the answer to this question is pretty simple. The answer is, it's half a gallon. It's half a gallon because this is what the German opportunity cost is. So if the Germans spend half a gallon of wine making 1 barrel of beer, and if the French offer them anything less, the Germans would say, no, we're not going to accept this because it costs us more to make this beer than what you're offering for it. So Germans will be happy to accept anything above their opportunity cost. So anything from 0.5 all the way to the infinity. Now, if we think about France is somewhere here, because their opportunity cost of beer is higher. And if we ask a question of what's the maximum that the French would be willing to pay for that barrel of beer, the answer is actually pretty simple. It's 0.8. The French will not be willing to give up anything more than 0.8 of a gallon per barrel of beer, because this 0.8 is how much it costs them to make it. So if the Germans ask for anything more than 0.8, the French would say, no, we can make it at home cheaper. So the French would say anything less than 0.8 is something that we would happily pay. Look at this, guys. We have this area between 0.5 and 0.8 where the interests of both countries overlap. This area is where that mutually beneficial exchange rate will be. With the limited information that we have right now, it's kind of hard for us to say where exactly. It's hard for us to say where exactly we're going to end up with the prices, but we can definitely say that we will be in this range between 0.5 and 0.8. There's always mutually beneficial terms of trade will be in that range between the lowest and the highest opportunity cost of a good. So in this situation, between 0.5 and 0.8. So, yeah, if Germany, the specific answer depends on the bargaining power of each of the countries. Say if Germans have more bargaining power, they'll probably push that price closer to 0.8. If the French have more bargaining power, they'll probably push that price closer to 0.5. But without having more information, we can't give an answer. So if you have any questions about this, just shoot me an email. Other than that, guys, this completes the required part of the trade discussion. I will add one more video where I'll show you guys the example of how both of these countries can benefit from trade. But that's just that, an example. So you should be able to describe and understand absolute and comparative advantage. You should be able to identify who has absolute and comparative advantage based on a specific example, numerical example similar to what I did here, and should be able to figure out the mutually beneficial terms of trade. Good luck.